As the Lunar New Year approaches in just about a week, I want to wish everyone a joyful 2025. But can we truly say it'll be a happy one? Back in January of last year, before Trump took office, he made a troubling statement. He hoped the US would face an economic crisis in 2024. His reasoning? He didn't want to be another Hoover, a president remembered for economic failure. Essentially, even in early 2024, he seemed to be cursing both America and the world, anticipating a year of losses for investors, bankruptcies for businesses, job cuts, and rising unemployment. So, what did Trump's comment mean? While you can find plenty of criticism of him online, it's hard to ignore the historical parallel with Herbert Hoover. In the 1930s, after Hoover was elected, the US economy collapsed almost overnight, with the stock market losing 90% of its value, taking even the top-performing stocks down. Half of all businesses went bankrupt. By the time Hoover took office, 13 million Americans were out of work, over 5,000 banks had failed, and the streets were filled with homeless citizens. Ironically, many of them weren't lazy or uneducated. Some had once owned homes or run successful businesses. But Hoover's presidency became synonymous with economic disaster, despite the fact that the crisis wasn't his fault. That's why Trump didn't want to be a second Hoover. Nobody wants to be remembered as the president who oversaw a financial collapse. But why did Trump want the crisis to hit before his inauguration? If the economy had been stable, he wouldn't have had to worry about inheriting a failed legacy. It's almost as if the US economy was a ticking time bomb. Whoever was in charge when it exploded would bear the blame. Trump hoped the bomb would go off on Biden's watch so he could swoop in and save the day once he took office. The problem? The bomb hasn't gone off yet, and it looks like it's about to land in Trump's lap. Will he panic? Well, there are two possible strategies. One is to armor up with policies that prevent the crisis, but that's not really his call yet. Biden could have done that, but now, with Biden out of the picture, Trump may need to find another way. The second strategy is to delay the inevitable. This is something Biden tried to do unsuccessfully, and now that Trump has a chance to lead, it's unclear if he'll welcome the explosion as an opportunity to be the economic hero, or if he'll run away from the mess altogether. Moving on to 2025, let's imagine that a year from now, you could look back and change the course of your financial fate. Many people claim they're poor because they didn't come from money. But what if you could predict future market trends? Say, for instance, you knew Bitcoin would hit $100,000, or Nvidia stocks would skyrocket. Even without money, power, or family fortune, would you risk borrowing everything to invest? Many NBA stars and lottery winners went from riches to rags because of poor decisions. So, is wealth really about how much you have? Or is it about your ability to see opportunities ahead? What if we could know in advance what's coming next year? Would you take action to change your life? If you don't want to be a pawn in someone else's game, and you're looking for ways to break into a higher tier of financial success, stay tuned. I promise to bring you more valuable insights in the future. If you're worried about taking action, just hit like, and the video will save to your playlist. You'll be able to come back and act when you're ready. This year may surprise many people with events that seem impossible now, like the unexpected cooperation between the US and China to benefit the global economy. Before the election, Trump talked tough on China, imposing massive tariffs. But after he took office, he surprised many by inviting China to his inauguration and reducing tariffs. What does that tell us? Trump's policies may seem tough during the election, but they often soften once he's in power. Interestingly, whether it's Trump or Hillary, the one thing both agree on is taking a hard stance against China. The question arises, have US-China relations always been like this? And if you take a step back, you might notice something striking. China has made a lot of money while the US has been importing countless cheap goods from them. To put it simply, before China joined the WTO, their foreign debt was actually larger than their foreign reserves. In other words, China owed more to the world than they were earning from it. Back then, the US made a deal. You handle production, and we'll buy the goods from you. We'll pay you in dollars, and with those dollars you can purchase whatever you need from around the world. We have money and you have goods. It was a win-win for both sides. The US didn't need to worry about manufacturing anymore and could focus on investing, trading stocks, and adjusting interest rates for profit. For the US, this arrangement helped keep prices low because they could buy cheaply from China, while China amassed dollars at a rapid pace, eventually becoming the second largest economy in the world. Some argue that China's rise has now threatened America's position, and that's why the US has resorted to sanctions and constraints. But looking closer, it's not so simple. At one point, President Obama even extended an olive branch, inviting China to help shape a global economic future together. This was part of a broader idea. The US and China would cooperate to dominate the world economy. What does that really mean? Wall Street has a saying, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. Essentially, America was offering China a seat at the table to carve up the world, share the spoils, and work together. But would China accept? From America's perspective, it seemed like a friendly invitation to collaborate and share the world's riches. But the story of Chinese diplomacy suggests a different interpretation. To understand why, let's take a look at Chinese history. Before the Qin dynasty unified China, the country was split into several states. The state of Qin was the strongest, but other states often formed alliances to oppose it. At one point, Qin sent envoys to the state of Qi to suggest that, rather than clash, they should share the world between them. Qi would control the east, and Qin would take the west. The king of Qi agreed to the offer, but the other states didn't approve. They saw Qi's decision to ally with Qin as a betrayal, and together, they attacked Qi, weakening the state. Eventually, Qin was able to pick off the other states one by one, leading to the unification of China. Does this story sound familiar? If China had accepted Obama's invitation, it would have meant participating in a global economic feast, but as a guest. They wouldn't have been able to challenge the US for the seat of honor. In fact, they might have even been expected to take a subordinate role, producing goods while the US controlled the flow of technology and wealth. When China refused this invitation, it led to escalating tensions. The US may have felt betrayed. We invited you to the table, and now you want to surpass us. Do you think you can take our place? This refusal sparked a trade war under Trump and a financial conflict under Biden. Fast forward to today, and China's real estate and stock markets have taken a severe hit. But do you know why? It's because the US effectively imported inflation into China. Here's how. China used to be relatively passive when it came to printing money. They controlled the foreign exchange rate. If an American businessman wanted to buy from China, they couldn't just use US dollars directly. They had to exchange dollars for Chinese yuan. This meant that for every $1 billion flowing into China, the government had to ensure there was an equivalent amount of yuan available for exchange. The financial crisis of 2008 triggered a massive flood of money into China, as the US printed money to bail itself out. In a few short years, $3 trillion flowed into China, meaning the Chinese government had to release over 21 trillion yuan to keep the currency exchange in balance. Imagine the impact of suddenly printing 21 trillion yuan. The currency would devalue, causing inflation. Prices on everyday goods would skyrocket, and if a bowl of noodles used to cost 5 yuan, it might jump to 10. To counteract this, China's government encouraged people to invest in real estate, which absorbed the excess money and kept inflation in check. As a result, property values soared, but many Chinese citizens couldn't afford homes despite prices rising continually. Then the trade war hit. As the US reduced trade with China, money started flowing out, and interest rates rose, attracting Chinese investors to the US. As each dollar left China, the Chinese government had to withdraw an equivalent amount of yuan. This rapid outflow of money sent shockwaves through China's economy. To make matters worse, many Chinese real estate companies had borrowed heavily from US sources. When interest rates increased, they couldn't repay their debts and faced the risk of bankruptcy. This created a vicious cycle of market panic, leading to a collapse in both the real estate and stock markets in China. In essence, the US imported inflation into China, inflated their asset prices, and then pulled out. As a result, China's assets devalued, and the US used its stronger dollar to buy up these discounted assets. This strategy is often referred to as shearing the sheep, a tactic that in the past has caused economic harm to countries like Japan and South Korea. By manipulating the financial system and exploiting the situation, the US emerged as the primary beneficiary. However, in China, due to strict financial regulations, many foreign investments cannot penetrate the market, which means the plan to buy low can't be fully executed. This has led to asset prices in China remaining relatively low. The question is, why has Trump returned to the old path and invited China to join again? In recent years, more and more countries have joined the de-dollarization movement, abandoning the US dollar and no longer purchasing US government bonds. Even Japan and the UK, the two countries that bought the most US bonds, are now re-evaluating these investments. Many countries that have been sheared by the US in the past have chosen to cooperate with China. As a result, Trump must take action to weaken this new alliance. The banquet that China once refused might now be rejected again. Trump understands this, but refusing a seat at the table doesn't mean refusing cooperation. Did you notice that by the end of 2023, during the most intense period of trade and financial warfare, the US and China quietly formed a small financial group? After the formation of this group, the US refrained from raising interest rates aggressively, and China continued to buy US bonds for several months. This suggests that there is still room for negotiation between the two countries. The most important thing for Trump when he took office was to defuse the time bomb, and using China's help to do so seemed like the best strategy. Clearly, reducing tensions and avoiding war are recognized goals. However, there is another issue. When the US pulls money out of China, inflation no longer gets transferred there. The US can no longer import cheap goods from China and must start producing domestically. However, American workers' wages are much higher than those in China, which means US-made goods will also be more expensive, leading to inflation in the US. If you look at the current state of the US stock market and real estate, they've grown to a point where they resemble a water reservoir at full capacity. Meanwhile, US government bonds are no longer selling, leading to the risk of an overall asset collapse, especially in commercial real estate, which could become the trigger. If you're unsure, you can refer to my previous videos to understand the situation better. Trump's biggest fear is that this bomb will explode during his term. What can he do then? Look back at what President Hoover did during the Great Depression in the US. Hoover imposed massive tariffs on the entire world, up to 50%. He thought this would encourage Americans to buy domestic goods, helping the country generate money to support its citizens. The result was that other countries also imposed tariffs on the US, preventing America from importing goods and cutting its exports by half. What does this mean? It means that no money was earned, but goods were becoming increasingly expensive. When Trump took office, he prepared to implement policies similar to Hoover's. Trump's current policy aims to impose tariffs on the entire world. This has caused opposition from countries worldwide, but even more intense resistance from American capitalists. As mentioned before, many of the world's major corporations are actually controlled by American capitalists. For example, Samsung is a South Korean brand, but most of its profits end up in the pockets of American investors because the major stakeholders are Wall Street firms. This means that South Koreans are essentially working for American capitalists. When they earn $100, $70 of that goes to Wall Street. Trump's policy is to force large corporations to bring their factories back to the US, or he will impose tariffs on them. On the surface, it seems like South Korea is the one bearing the brunt, but in reality, the real victims are the American capitalists. Therefore, issues like America's national debt, inflation, unemployment, and even the potential for war are ticking time bombs that Trump needs to resolve through his negotiation skills. However, America's internal problems cannot simply be shifted onto China. Trump and Wall Street have had a tense relationship for a long time. The true decision makers in this scenario are the capitalists on Wall Street, who control whether the US stock market will enter a recession or not. As I mentioned earlier, they can lower interest rates, print more money, and inject this capital into the market to push stock prices up. But they can also pull out capital and cause stock prices to plummet. Recently, there has been much discussion in Wall Street circles about whether the US is entering a recession. This is the reason Trump fears he might end up as the second Hoover, a president who left a lasting negative legacy. That's why Trump's current focus is on quickly negotiating with China after taking office. Even though they may not dominate the world together, they could restore some cooperation to support each other through difficult times. Recently, Trump even proposed merging Canada into the US to make Canada the 51st state. If this becomes a reality, what would be the result? First, the US would surpass Russia to become the largest country in the world by area. More importantly, doesn't the time bomb of the US get solved if all of Canada's resources belong to the US? Instantly, the US would own vast resources like oil, minerals, fresh water reserves, and labor. Moreover, all the profits earned would go straight to the US. Isn't that essentially a solution to the lack of money for consumption? Many might think that Trump's idea of merging Canada into the US is far-fetched, just a playful remark. However, a statement made by a person doesn't always equate to their actions. If you judge someone's entire approach based solely on a single statement, it's premature. Yet, it's undeniable that Trump has likely considered this idea. Though Trump may sometimes make spontaneous remarks, that's just part of his image, how he creates his persona. In reality, every statement made by a president, especially on diplomatic matters, is thoroughly reviewed and calculated by his team before it's uttered. Trump, being a businessman, operates this way as well. Recently, Trump has been quite firm in his stance, saying that Americans have no choice but to either pay taxes to the US or bear the cost of military protection from the US. This indicates that by 2025, when the US is short on funds, they will seek to extract resources from elsewhere to sustain themselves. This process started last year, with money from Europe and Japan flowing into the US, and most global currencies depreciating compared to the US dollar. This could just be the beginning. It's similar to the US not being able to disarm its time bomb alone, and instead pushing the burden onto its allies to protect itself. What's promised before an election and what happens after can be completely different. Before the election, the goal is to win the presidency. After winning, the goal shifts to solving America's problems. Voters are more concerned with the outcomes Trump delivers, not just his campaign promises. Even if Trump fulfills his election pledges, if he becomes a second Hoover, the only legacy he leaves will be a negative one. Therefore, the smokeless war between the US and China that's been ongoing for the past few years might temporarily halt due to negotiations, allowing both sides to breathe a sigh of relief. It's clear both nations want to engage in dialogue, but the key question is, what will be the bargaining chip? How will Trump negotiate with China? The answer is simple. If you make a concession, I'll make a concession. So what is the biggest benefit China wants to gain from the US concession? Will this seriously hurt the US? The answer depends on each person's perspective. If you have an opinion, feel free to leave a comment and share it. As we approach the new year of 2020, I'd like to share a few sincere thoughts. Many people know that the place they live will eventually be exploited or even wiped out, but they can't do anything about it. Why? Because they don't have a choice. What they lack isn't courage, but the option to choose, their source of stable income. What if, after migrating, they don't find a job? What if they run out of savings? Therefore, most people can only move forward one step at a time because they don't have choices. They don't have a job that generates income 24/7, so they have to work non-stop. They can't earn money anywhere, so they must stay where they were born to survive. This is why I recommend that everyone learn how to invest. You don't have to learn from me specifically, but in life, you must learn how to invest, and the sooner, the better. People need choices. For example, when it comes to migration, you should be able to choose whether to go or not, but you shouldn't be limited to only one option: staying. For me, my assets are the result of many hardships that this generation has accumulated. Therefore, I must find ways to ensure that they are passed down to future generations. That's why I create content like this. Everything I say comes from the bottom of my heart. I hope my words will bring positive energy and inspire hope and opportunities for everyone. The more people who can earn more money because of something I said, the greater my knowledge and virtue will grow. In recent years, we've all been living in a time of great turbulence with war, pandemics, and economic stagnation. I don't expect everyone to be completely happy in 2025, but at least I hope you'll have the option to choose. Today is the beginning of 2025, and every new beginning is often peaceful. However, the economic prosperity of the US in recent years, as reflected in the data, is actually a series of hidden time bombs. Will these bombs explode one by one and cause damage to our assets? How will this game unfold? Due to time constraints, I must end here. I share free information about how to become wealthy, a successful entrepreneur, an investor, and achieve financial freedom. If you don't want to miss out, I suggest subscribing to my channel, turning on notifications, and sharing this video with others. I truly wish blessings to those who like this video. I hope that everyone will soon achieve financial freedom. All it takes is for you to find a few helpful words in today's content to make your life better, and that would fulfill my purpose.